Good Tuesday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Some disturbing news out of Browns world earlier today. Browns rookie defensive back Mike Hall Jr. arrested in Avon this morning following a domestic disturbance on Monday night. Reports are a firearm was involved in the disturbance with Michael Hall Jr.'s fiancee. Browns issued a statement on Hall. We're aware of the incident involving Mike Hall Jr. last night. Mike and his representatives have been in touch with the appropriate authorities. We are in the process of gathering information and will have no further comment at this time. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, you never want to have to deal with that. You certainly don't want to have to deal with it. Training camp, getting ready for joint practices. You can't do that. You know, he's got to be better than that.
Well, yeah, as a human being or whatever, you don't do those things, and it gets magnified, obviously, public scrutiny, and it's so unfortunate. His first game, and he raved about, dreaming about playing in stadium, growing up here at Streetsboro and then at Ohio State, and he's kind of like the hometown kid coming home. And then this news comes out. It's not good for anybody, but it's not good for him. He was your top pick, and now you have to deal with not only a distraction, but what do you do going forward whenever you have a gun involved? It's pretty serious. I know last year Perry and Winfrey, I believe it was last year, had some off-field issue that he was dismissed from the team. Maybe it was 2 years ago, but it's always a distraction. And, obviously he was somebody they were counting on this year. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it. And, this violates, as I understand, his contract. Not that has a lot to do with it, but, it's going to cost him a lot of money if the Browns so choose to revoke or not pay him that, salary. He can get it back if he plays, but they have to decide what's best for him off the field, as a human being.
Yeah, and you can be sure domestic violence is something the NFL takes really seriously. So if he is, if the Browns choose to give him a second chance, if you will, he's probably going to miss time and be suspended. But again, we'll let that process play out. It has happened. All right. Deshaun Watson was on the podcast QB Unplugged with his quarterback coach, Quincy Avery. Talked about his rehab process.
My shoulder's fine. I've been at every practice. I made every throw. I've been competing with the first team, 11-on-11 drills, 7-on-7 drills, 1-on-1 drills. Any drill that you want to mention that we do, I'm in it. So, I have a certain amount of throws I have to throw each and every day coming from Dr. Elatrash and the team. And once I max out on those throws, I have to stop. So that's why it is what it is.
Little do they know how many days we've been on the field tracking meticulously how many throws, you know what I'm saying? It's not an accident how many throws he's throwing or how many yards he's throwing. So I'm telling people, this is everything's
It's all
planned.
calculated.
Everything's
it's like
planned.
a picture, and I have to take the picture out. I've had a significant shoulder injury and process and replacement, you know what I'm saying? So, same thing pitchers do. Hey, you're going to pitch or you're going to throw on this particular day 20 throws. You're going to throw 20 throws at this speed. Can't go over it, can't go underneath it. You know what I'm saying? So, this is what you got to do. And you have to follow those protocols because you have to lead up to where you want to get to. There's a bigger picture.
Fred, it's listening to him explain it does make sense. It's ramping up. Minor league rehab that pitchers would go through, and you're getting up to now. The next step is he won't get it until preseason game number 3. Contact, I would imagine, is the next step.
It is interesting there. He threw in a word. I don't know if that was, I thought he said something about a replacement or something. Maybe he just misspoke a little, but I think the biggest thing is that I hear from fans and talking to people is just, he hasn't played since last November. And even if it's preseason games, he seems like he would need the reps. Now I know Stefanski's, explanation is the joint practices. He values that more than the preseason games because they can control that, and I get that too. But he did say that Watson is fully cleared for contact, so that's it's kind of you haven't got that kind of explanation when he's in front of the media. He's only been, I think, in front of us once or twice since camp opened. And so you don't really know where he's at. We've seen him out there throwing all the throws, but I think a little bit. Can you simulate in practice what it is like a game? There is something when the lights go on, you get a little bit of an extra juice and so forth in front of the crowd. So I know that the next 2 days are going to be big with the Vikings. They're going to script it, and he's to get most of the reps.
Take us through that. You wrote an article about why Kevin Stefanski thinks that these Vikings joint practices that'll go on tomorrow and Thursday are so important.
Well, I think he's not the only coach, but a lot of them are putting less and less emphasis on preseason games. The answer is we play them because they're on the schedule. We also know that it's part of the season ticket package and pretty good moneymaker for the teams because the players aren't getting, their full salary in the preseason. And so, when you look at that, games are televised and there's a lot of revenue involved there. But I think from the coaching standpoint, this is the fourth straight year that Kevin Stefanski has done joint practices. There were some in the past coaches that would do it, but it wasn't to this extreme every year. And I said it earlier because the coaching staff, particularly, Kevin Stefanski, can control, what the script is. They know that the players are scripted. Even though you're going against the number ones on the Vikings, they are mandated not to touch the quarterbacks. They're not allowed to touch the quarterbacks on their own team. So it will carry over into this. When you get out in a preseason game, all bets are off. And when you have 90 guys on the roster, there's somebody that's fighting for his life, maybe on the opposition, that's going to go all out and maybe have a late hit or do something that he's not supposed to try to make a name for himself or to try to make a team. So I think the bottom line is, Stefanski said it again yesterday, is the control of the setting and the script. And sometimes you don't get all the situations in a game. You might want to work on your 2-minute drill, but you really can't do it, if you're 4th and 10 or you want to work on 3rd and 3 and you have a 2nd and 2 and 3rd and 1 and different situations that you might want to specifically work on, or goal line or red zone. You can't dial them up in a game. You can't say timeout, we want to put the ball in the 20 or we want to do this or that. They can do that in these scrimmages. So you're going to see ones versus ones, high octane. He mentioned going against Brian Flores' defense. And so I think the Browns look at this as the peak, the most important 2 days of training camp, these joint practices this year with the Vikings.
All right, before we go to break, let's look back at the first preseason game, Green Bay. Who grabbed your attention, and was there anything that you saw in that first preseason game that you were concerned with?
Well, I mean, you're always concerned with the depth, but when you have 26 of your frontline players inactive or held out for minor injuries, you're going to have that. I mean, think about it. When they go to the regular season, they'll probably be 50. Well, there's 53 on the roster. So if 26 were inactive, and I think most all of those are projected to be on the roster, that's your upper echelon. So you're playing your second and third team and fourth team and a lot of young guys. And so you're really doing that for evaluating purposes, and you don't really know what's going to happen. As far as those that I thought did well, I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he did well last year in the preseason. In fact, he did so well that the Browns felt they could trade their backup, Josh Dobbs, and make him the backup, not thinking that you're going to have to use the backup. We all know what happened. They had 5 different starters. He wasn't ready for the bright lights. He's played well in the training camp and practices, and I think he carried that over into the game. I think he's battling with Tyler Huntley to be the third quarterback. Browns don't want to be short this year, so they have Jameis Winston, as well behind Deshaun Watson. So I think he showed well. I think Mike Hall showed well. He didn't fill up the stat sheet, but he made some plays. You could see his athleticism and pressure on offense. Jamari Thrash had that one series. I think he caught 3 balls, some contested. Amari and Brown, I think, had some returns, and he also had like 2 or 3 nice catches. So, and then Michael Woods, he's a guy that's been making plays all training camp. I think he's really pushing hard for the roster. And, the running game was not there. Brady Breeze was kind of a no-name guy that came in late. I think he had 10, 11 tackles. He was all over the field. I think a safety, somebody that Jim Schwartz had or was familiar with the Titans. So all in all, it was the first preseason game. It was pretty lackluster overall.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, loot and scratch. Find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I was thinking about the preseason games. I know they're meaningless games, and you don't want to see your key players get hurt, but I'm just wondering why Stefanski refuses to play Watson any snaps until the third preseason game. If there's a team that you want to follow how they do things, it's the Chiefs. I saw Patrick Mahomes, their all-world quarterback, play in the very first preseason game. Now, just because Watson plays 1 preseason game or 2 preseason games doesn't guarantee success, doesn't guarantee a Super Bowl. But if you're going to follow any team's recipe, I think it would be the Chiefs. My question is, why does Stefanski refuse to give Watson any meaningful snaps until the third game? He definitely needs to get out there. I understand they're probably concerned with his shoulder, and he's probably not quite ready. But even when he was healthy, and since Stefanski's been here, he refused to give his starting quarterback any snaps until the final preseason game. Thanks. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Fred, I understand both sides of the argument. I think Deshaun Watson does need preseason snaps. I would be concerned. It's a risk-reward thing. If you don't have Jack Conklin, you don't have Jed Wills, I don't know that I want him, taking hits. I know he's going to eventually have to, but the offensive line, I think, factored into it this particular year.
Yeah, only 2 starters. You had the center and the guard. You had Ethan Posick and Wyatt Teller were the only 2, that were able to play in that game the other night. And so it does factor in. It is the question, but as you can see, he answered the question himself. Kevin Stefanski chooses to take a chance and go into the season healthy as opposed to take any risk of losing, a player, especially starting quarterback. And also with Watson said he's, been managed very strict. So I'm pretty much of the opinion that they scripted this out back when they put together the rehab plan, because one of the last practices in Greenbrier, towards the end of practice, Watson quit throwing, and there was some speculation by a couple members of the media that he must be hurt or something. Well, I'm pretty much sure after hearing his explanation, when he hits a number,
Yep,
he's done. And that probably is what happened down there. And so I think that's still the script. I don't know if Mahomes, how much he played in the first game. I don't know if he played in the second game. I didn't really follow him. But I'd almost think you're better off playing in the last one as opposed to the first one if you're not going to play anymore. But I agree, he needs reps. He's a notorious slow starter. I mean, last year against the Bengals, they won, but he was kind of off to a lethargic start. And so I don't know. Kevin Stefanski, this is how he's done it, and he prefers to have the rest and take his chance with the rust.
Yeah, you mentioned the thing at the Greenbrier where he stopped throwing. He did address that earlier in that podcast. So what happened is it was a period where it's like a betterment. I forget the exact term he used. It's an option area where you didn't have to do it. He wasn't supposed to be involved with it. He went to throw it and realized it and kind of stopped throwing in the middle of it because he had hit his total. So he did address that, and that's kind of what happened as you had thought. Going back to that, QB Unplugged with Quincy Avery, Watson talked about Ken Dorsey and his imprint on this year's offense.
Oh, for sure. They work together all the time. Kevin getting a lot of information from Dorsey and what he likes, what Kevin likes, and they just matching, and they're just putting everything together. And I think I hear Dorsey's voice. Dorsey's he's not limited to what he can say and what he can speak on. He runs all the meetings. He controls all the meetings. He controls the quarterback meetings. Controls the drills on the field, the practice, scripts, all that. So he has a big influence on it.
And Fred, we've heard that it's collaborative. That kind of tells you how involved Ken Dorsey is with this offense. Even though he's not calling the plays, he's running practices and he's involved in the game plan.
Yeah, it's kind of what Alex Van Pelt did last year, or when he was here, actually the first 4 years with Stefanski. And obviously he felt good enough to want to stay with the Browns, even though he wasn't calling the play. So Ken Dorsey seems to be content. And he also, I think, a little overlooked is it allows him to really give all the attention pretty much to Watson and the other quarterbacks because he is the quarterback coach. And so during the games, he can be with them and he doesn't have to necessarily be, doing something else. So, no, they do. They work as a team and they throw in their opinions and all throughout the week. And so the other thing that I was going to say about Watson playing in the preseason is I would think he'd have some input. When we asked him, he said, hey, whatever Kevin wants to do. And so if he really felt strongly that he needed to play, I think he would pound the table a little bit more. So I think he has some input in this. If they said, look, I have to play or I'm not going to be ready, I think they would say, okay, we'll get you out there.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And again, with a guy that's been in the league before, he knows what he has to do to get his body ready. Now, it's different because he's kind of ramping up the shoulder, but it's a risk-reward thing. I mean, you can say he needs the snaps, and what happens if somebody blows an assignment and he gets blindsided and then he's out, 4-6 weeks? So, I understand both sides of it. This is from PFF. We're going to take a look at some of the top 10 contracts at a couple of positions. The Browns front office continues to get some backlash from the Deshaun Watson trade nationally, as well as, that contract that they gave him. We're in year 3 of that 5-year contract, and Watson's contract's about to fall out of the top 10 of all quarterbacks. So Burrow and Lawrence and Love are all making 55. This is average annual value, $55 million. Tua, 53.1. Goff, 53. Herbert, 52.5. Lamar Jackson, 52. Hurts, 51. Kyler Murray, 46.1. And Deshaun Watson, $46 million. Again, it's I show that to show Andrew Berry had a pretty good idea of what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, the animal nature of the beast is, the next one that signs will probably be more than that. I mean, I don't know what Dak Prescott and some of these other guys, are going to get, but he's just going to be going down. Same way it was with the wide receiver, same way with cornerbacks. I mean, at one time, Denzel Ward was the highest paid. And so that's the nature of it. And there's some quarterbacks on there that
Yeah.
they're better than Deshaun Watson. I mean, he's obviously had – this is kind of good for the Browns that as a competitor, you want to be amongst the best. And so I heard him say it. He wants to be – he's got the money regardless. He wants to be known as a elite quarterback, even better than what he was before. I don't know if he'll ever get to that, but I don't see why he could not. And if he wants to get another contract with the Browns, I think that, it's behooving of him this year to go out and put up some numbers and lead the Browns deep into the playoffs.
All right, so we know the Browns and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah are a little bit apart relative to money with a new contract. What might it cost to keep JOK? Here's a look at the top 10 paid linebackers. Again, these are both from PFF. Roquan Smith, $20 million a year. Fred Warner, $19 million a year. Tremaine Edwards, $18 million a year. Matt Milano, $14.2. Patrick Queen, $13.7. Al Shair, $11.3. Zaire Franklin, $10.4. $10 million for Corke. And you see $10 million, $9 million. As I look at that, my guess is JOK wants to be in the top 5, and he's got the tackles for loss. So I'm guessing he's probably looking for something. And we haven't heard any reports from him. We just heard that they were not close dollar figure wise. My guess he wants something around $15 million a year, and the Browns want to make sure the production they saw second half of last year is the production they're getting going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 years he had a little bit of issue with staying on the field, was dinged up a little bit, and I think part of it was just coming into the NFL and also his body type, and maybe he was asked to be more of a traditional linebacker than see the ball, go get the ball guy. But Jim Schwartz used him, I feel, very suited to his strengths. And you saw he had 10 tackles for loss combined in his first 2 years. And then last year had 20 tackles for loss alone in 2023. And he was playing freer. He was going and getting the ball carrier, going and getting the quarterback, going and getting the receiver, on a screen pass. And so I think JOK is everything that envisioned when they traded up to get him. And the guy who did that was Andrew Berry. He's going to find a way to extend him. I see it very similar to Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit had a couple injury-prone years, at the start last year. Towards the end of the season, ironically, it was a game I think he got hurt. As soon as he got hurt, he went on injury reserve and missed the final couple games or 4 games with a groin injury. They announced that they had signed him to a 3-year extension. So I could see that happening here in JOK just before the end of the year. I'm not that concerned that he doesn't get signed before the season. I don't think there's any way in the world they're letting him leave. He's the type – they don't invest traditionally in linebackers, but he's the type of guy that they want at that position in Jim Schwartz's defense. So I think that they'll get something done, before the season's over, in my opinion.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take another quick time out on the side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yes, this is Carl from Rochester. I called yesterday and talked about our preseason game the other night, how bad our offensive line and our defensive line looked, how they were getting nowhere near the quarterback. And you guys said we played a lot of third stringers and this and that. And I had said that these are the guys that are going to have to play when our starters get hurt, and they will get hurt. They always do. Then you turn around and I hear you guys talking how bad we were getting the ball run on and how concerning that was to you guys. Why couldn't you just agree with me and say the same thing when I called and said, yes, it's very concerning of things that are happening. We got to straighten that out. But you didn't. I wish you would explain to me why you can say that on your own, but not about me. But it is concerning that that happened. Okay, guys, take care.
So I always appreciate all the calls. The thing that I pushed back on was the play calling, because I disagree with the play calling. Relative to the second and third stringers, it's true, and I prefaced that by saying it when I said I was concerned about the run defense. What I was asking was if it was schematic relative to the run defense. So, Fred, we've talked about, we had 3 of the starting offensive linemen didn't see the field at all. James Hudson didn't play well. They started a undrafted rookie free agent at left guard. I don't think he's seen the field if somebody gets hurt. Just me. They had a guy playing center after Whippler got hurt that didn't play in center. So I pushed back because it wasn't the second stringers, it was the third and fourth stringers that were getting beat up.
Yeah, 26 guys were inactive. 53-man roster come the opening game, and barring injuries and so forth, they're always going to happen. That's half your team, and that's the top half of your team. If you go into the regular season with the team that played the other night, you're gonna be back to the Hugh Jackson era. Most of those guys playing are going to be cut. They're not going to be on an NFL roster. So, it is concerning, but that isn't the reality. And people are complaining that they play the starters and then they get hurt and then you don't have them, or do you save them, let them play their shape? You mentioned on the offensive line and defensive line, they had 2 starters on the offense and they had 2 starters on defense in that game. And the only reason Grant Delpit played and Rodney McLeod is because they had a couple safeties injured, that didn't play or were held out. So, yeah, you get down to that depth. That is the bottom of the roster. Those are your special teams type players. So any team that is playing their third and fourth stringers are not going to be good. No. I don't care what scheme you're in.
Well, in the way he prefaced it as well was, we're talking about wide receivers. Why aren't we talking about linemen and offensive and defensive linemen? Because they look terrible. That's why I pushed back. But anyway, you wrote an article about Grant Delpit and him potentially being, him thinking he can be a top safety. Take us through that article.
Well, Grant, we talked to him, and he said this last year. He said he wants to be great. He's motivated, and he knows, he feels like, what he played, even in college at LSU, he was one of the best safeties in the nation. And then he got the Achilles his rookie year, and he took him a while to get back. And he feels like, kind of like JOK, he didn't say this, but I compare him to JOK, is that he's now understanding the NFL game. There's been a lot of guys that don't look so good at the beginning of their career, and they get called busts or overdrafted. And I think he still has that determination. He said when we talked to him at Greenbrier that he feels like he hasn't done anything yet. And he wants to show that he should be considered one of the top safeties and be in the talk for Pro Bowl and awards like that. So you want things to motivate guys, and I think he's motivated. He got the contract. I don't think now he's, not going to be motivated to play well and be one of the best, because these guys, they're all getting paid. Some get more than the others, but he's set. And so he could just kind of back off. But I really think he's encouraged, and feels that he now knows that he can be one of the best players in the NFL at his position. And that's why the Browns, signed him to an extension.
So take a look at this. So one of the issues with Devin Bush historically, past few years, has been his run fits and gap integrity. That's something Jim Schwartz is really good at fixing. I thought Bush kind of flashed. I thought he looked pretty good. He wasn't in there a lot. When he was in there, he showed up.
Yeah, he's been taking advantage of opportunities. They had their probably top three linebackers, out, JOK, Jordan Hicks, and Tony Fields. So Bush has been getting a lot of reps. The Browns have him listed on their unofficial depth chart as a starter. I really think they're hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. There was something in him when he was the 10th pick in the draft by the Steelers, was third in Rookie of the Year voting, and he tore his ACL, and Steelers ended up giving up on him. He went to Seattle last year, kind of had a so-so year. Browns were able to get him on a 1 year, very, incentive contract. And so they're hoping that he could be at least a core special teams player. But if he can capture some of what he had before, and I think a lot of it is the coming back from an ACL injury. Sometimes it takes more time mentally to overcome that, and even physically. He's now been a couple of years removed from that. So he should be about as healthy as he's been. And so he's done pretty well. I saw him make an interception, an 11-on-11 team drill the other day. I thought in the game I made a note of him that he was one of the standouts. He was the leading tackler when he was in the first quarter. I think he had 5 tackles. And before he left the game, I think he still had 6 or so. So, yeah, I think he has a good chance to be on the field, be in the rotation, as one of the top 4 linebackers on the team.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now going to take one more time out, other side of the break. We'll take a look at some of the must-see matchups as the Browns get ready for joint practices. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. This from ESPN's First Take. Dan Orlovsky with his read of why Deshaun Watson has a lot of pressure on him this year, and also the Browns' trade to acquire Deshaun Watson.
This is also an organization, let's call it a buck. Dude, they moved on from Baker Mayfield after Baker had taken them from the worst organization in North American sports into the playoffs and beat their rival. And they said, dude, you weren't good enough. It's just like the Rams did with Jared Goff. Good player, we need to go win a Super Bowl. We need a great player. You're good, you're not good enough. The Browns did that with Baker, and I'm not mad at them for it. But they didn't go get Deshaun Watson because they needed a starting quarterback. They went and got Deshaun Watson because they believed that he was going to give them the best chance to go win a Super Bowl. That's where the pressure's coming from.
Fred, I think that is 100% accurate, and it's one of the reasons I have no problem at all with what Andrew Berry did to try to go get Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I agree with that, and we've said that. Is Baker Mayfield's a starting NFL quarterback? I think he's above average, but I don't think he's elite. Deshaun Watson at one time was elite. And the Browns thought they were trading for that elite quarterback. He hasn't been that since he's been here. So that's why it's so important for him to go out. And I've said it before, I think the talent and the numbers will take care of itself. He's got to just stay on the field. You know, the first year here, it was suspension. You know, we knew that was coming. But last year, he only played 6 games. And he'd get started, then he'd sit down. Then he'd get started, then he'd sit down. He's got to just get on the field, get on a roll, and play the whole season. And I agree. I think the Browns have a good enough roster, as evidenced last year, that they can make the playoffs with average quarterback play. But to get to the Super Bowl, they're going to need elite quarterback play. But most importantly, he's got to be available. The final 4 quarterbacks last year in the NFL, all were their franchise quarterbacks. You didn't have a backup. So that's why it's important, the pressure on him. I think in talking to him, he wants to be on the field, and that's almost to his detriment. I think last year maybe he stayed out there when he was hurt and played through it and didn't tell anybody. But, yeah, it's a big year for him to silence the critics. And I think overall, that's why, let's face it, that's why the Browns are under the radar in all the talk, because of Deshaun Watson. I mean, you'll hear analysts say, oh, they got the best roster, the top 5 roster in the NFL, but their quarterback's holding them back. And so, you know, they decided they had seen enough from Baker, and they felt like there was a chance to go out and get, you know, a guy like Deshaun Watson. We'll see. You know, it's still, they're going to live and die with that decision for the most part. But the debt's been paid other than the money now. You've paid for the draft picks. Now you got to, you know, going forward. And like I said, if he does what they're expecting, you know, everybody will forget about, you know, the past.
Yeah, without question. And I'm with you. If he plays 16 or 17 games, I think the numbers will take care of themselves. All right, this is from Dogs by Nature. 3 must-see matchups for the joint practices with the Vikings that start tomorrow. Number 1, Deshaun Watson versus the Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. Vikings disguise things very well, have earned a reputation for making quarterbacks look foolish by changing their picture post-snap. Number 2, Myles Garrett versus Christian Darrisaw. Vikings recently rewarded their franchise left tackle with a new contract, making him one of the highest-paid tackles in the NFL. For Garrett, it's a chance to flex his mettle as the reigning defensive player of the year. And number 3, Browns corners against Justin Jefferson. We should anticipate both starting outside corners, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, to see plenty of reps against the wideout. The Deshaun Watson thing is far and away the most important to me. What are your, as you look at it, what do you think of with the matchups? What are you paying attention to?
You know, those type of ones in the trenches. It is, you know, Kevin Stefanski said that they really feel like this is the most important aspect of what they're doing is these joint practices, and why they've structured to do it. It will be a little different with backup tackles in, because Jack Conklin, Jedrick Wills have not been out. And so, you know, but for those that want to have Watson get trial by fire, it's going to be trial by fire, because the Vikings and Brian Flores are going to come after the Browns. Now, they're not going to hit him, and that's what you want. And so he's going to get good looks, and I think we're going to be able to get a good look to see where he is. You know, how does he match up, you know, against another team in live action? And the same way with Myles Garrett, you know, and I'm not worried too much about those guys on defense. I think when they're all healthy, they will be fine. But those are good matchups, you know, and seeing the cornerbacks. I don't know. I could almost see Justin Jefferson, you know, being back down a little bit. They may not even bring him or play him. But if he's out there, those would be great matchups. Amari Cooper against the cornerbacks, and, you know, and see what Jerry Jeudy can do. He didn't practice yesterday. And so there's all kinds of matchups that will be intriguing to watch for sure.
You paying attention to whomever lines up at left tackle, given that we still don't know a whole lot about Jedrick Wills? And James Hudson struggled. I mean, that I will say.
Yeah, I mean, it's, for everybody that wants to beat on Jedrick Wills, I realize he was the 10th pick in the draft, but he's a bona fide starting NFL left tackle. He might not be at the top, but he's somewhere in the middle at least. And I've seen him out on the practice field watching. I really expected these physically unable to perform guys to start to come off the list, but you're 2 weeks into the games and still. The only thing I remember, J.C. Treader, he might have had arthroscopic surgery before camp or at the beginning of camp a few years ago. Didn't practice all training camp preseason. He started practicing, I think, the Monday of the first week of the game, and he started on Sunday. So I still think the plan is for sure Wills to be back. Conklin, we did see him at the game on the field, and we saw him yesterday. I was expecting to see him earlier, but I think that they're counting on most of those guys being back, but you're not going to see them in these joint practices.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
Always good to be with you, Dave. Have a great day.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. Always really insightful Browns coverage. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as the Cleveland Browns on SI. Straight ahead, we continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lute, and scratch. Find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Chris Sims from NBC's Pro Football Talk on the Browns 2024 roster.
It's a Super Bowl team. It's a Super Bowl roster. I mean, it is. There's no denying that. It's one of the better offensive lines in football. The receiver position's good, and Njoku's one of the better tight ends in the game. We know Chubb's not 100%, but there's still some good running backs there. The defense was number one in football. They got three corners that are shut down. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah's a killer at middle linebacker. We know Myles Garrett. I mean, they're ready. The question is the guy that's the highest paid guy on their team. That's what it is. And I don't know what to expect from him. I think that's real. I thought I was going to see the Deshaun Watson I thought we all saw last year a little bit. I thought it would happen, but it didn't. And like you said, it's 4 years of really playing a full season or doing anything at a consistently high level.
With that, let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as the Browns on SI. And Spencer, Chris Sims is a guy that has been squarely in the Deshaun Watson camp until this offseason. So I get it. The guy was 8-4 as a starter.
Yeah, listen, the Deshaun dilemma is, we know, the biggest talking point about this team until I think we see him play meaningful games. I think it has been kind of refreshing with training camp starting up. We've been able to talk about some other stuff. Deshaun's obviously still at the focal point, but there's been some other stuff going on that has drawn us in and allowed us to kind of analyze different areas. But he's right. Like, as much as we maybe want to kind of swallow that and not make it the overarching story, because we've been talking about it for 3 years now, that remains the biggest question mark for a team that, to Phil's point, I think is well equipped to potentially go chase a championship if things kind of fall their way. And yeah, like the record's the record. Deshaun's done some good things over the last couple of years when he has played, but it just hasn't been consistent enough. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly some areas of concern, which I know we'll talk about here a little bit, but I look up and down this roster and that championship window that the Browns are trying to maximize, particularly with Deshaun, while after they traded for Deshaun, is still wide open in my eyes.
Yeah, and again, I don't think he played the 6 games the suspension year. I don't think he played 4 consecutive games last year. And that, as a quarterback, if you can't get out there and play, you're going to struggle. All right.
Sorry, I didn't.
No,
I was
go.
Just gonna say that's what makes it so hard. Is because I know people love clinging on to the second half of that Ravens game. You have the Cardinals game in there. You have the Titans game when he started getting it going at the beginning of the season last year. And you probably can pull maybe 1 or 2 games from the year prior, the suspension year, which I think we all kind of considered like a wash almost. But yeah, like it just hasn't been consistent enough is the biggest thing. Like I too see the hints of it, but can he go out and do it for a whole season? Can he even stay healthy for a whole season? I think that's another tentacle off of this conversation. Isn't even like, can he play at that level? It's, can he play at that level and stay on the field for a considerable amount of time throughout the season?
Yeah, which is really interesting because he really hadn't had the injury issues until here. I mean, he had the ACL, he had a punctured lung, and all right. 3 problems the Browns are already dealing with in training camp. This from Dog Pound Daily. Number 1, injuries. Training camp preseason haven't been kind to the Browns, especially backup centers. Brian Allen went down earlier. Luke Whippler carted off in the preseason opener. Number 2, run game concerns. In the preseason opener, we saw the run game depth firsthand, and it wasn't the prettiest of sights. Group total just 56 yards on the ground. John Kelly and Pierre Strong both tying for the team in rushing yards with 15, and John Kelly isn't here anymore. QB and wide receiver depth. The good problem for the Browns that they're facing is QB and wide receiver depth. It's going to be difficult to trim down both positions. The injuries are a concern. I get, if you don't have Jedrick Wills and you don't have Jack Conklin and you're starting DeJuan Jones and you're starting James Hudson, I don't know that I want to see Deshaun Watson behind that line, especially with Javion Cohen. And he did fine, but give yourself at least the opportunity to keep this guy healthy with a decent offensive line.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Dave, I think we're going to sort of be stuck seeing that combination potentially to start the season of offensive linemen. It's less about Jones, because I do think they value Jones as the future at the position, even if he's still a little raw in some places and it's only his second year. I think they expect that he's going to sort of become a foundational player up front for them, especially as, other guys start aging out. We know Joe Bitonio's only got a couple years left on that offensive line. And so they at least feel, I think, comfortable that they have one of those spots kind of locked up for the future with his presence. But yeah, like what they're going to do at left tackle is going to be fascinating. I think we all expected, and listen, like the Whippler injury from the preseason game, that sucked. And, they make the quick trade for Nick Harris, which I think made a lot of sense for them, connecting the dots on that one. Guy who's very familiar with your team, the culture, generally what you want to do with this offense, even though it'll be a little bit different. So I think that was a natural move for them to sort of fill that void that they now had. So like these other injuries that have happened, like they're concerning, but I think it's the injuries that are still kind of lingering from last year that are the biggest concern of all, to your point. The fact that Wills isn't out there yet, the fact that Conklin isn't out there yet, and we have some questions about what that left tackle spot's going to look like. Plus, you throw in the other sort of overarching, cloud hanging over all of this with Jedrick Wills, which is, are they going to pay him long term? Like, you're trying to get an answer to that question, and so the less games he plays, maybe the less sample size you have to know if you want to pay him what he would command on the market. So yeah, that's definitely something leading up to the season. That's going to be continually fascinating to follow, because if he's not ready come week 1, what that left tackle spot looks like as they try to protect Deshaun Watson, who's their big asset that they're trying to bring back from the shoulder injury already, could be problematic. It really could.
Yeah, and I would say the run game concerns, I think injuries play into that. I think the line plays into that. You were playing an undrafted rookie free agent as one of your starting tackles. So when you got past that, the other thing is Deontay Foreman didn't play, and that's key.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say too, like this offense is different this year, right? Like I don't know that we should take away a ton from a week one of the preseason game this weekend in terms of, what they were trying to do. They weren't really showing a lot, but I don't know that you're going to get like the, 15 yards for both those guys that kind of led the team. I think that was kind of a testament to that game was just kind of a slog and boring in a lot of ways. And they weren't showing a lot, but I also think you Browns fans probably are going to have to get used to this idea that they're not going to be running the ball with as much authority as they used to, because this offense is, more 11 personnel, spread them out, throw it around around the field a little bit. So I just think that's also going to be par for the course. Now I'm not saying it can't be as bad as your two leading rushers only having 15 yards, but yeah, I think like early stages of seeing how things are going to look different is kind of what we're gonna see play out throughout the rest of the preseason.
And I think they should be doing what they're doing offensively because it's what Deshaun Watson does well. So I think there were two things. Deshaun Watson hasn't been healthy, and you've been asking him to do things that aren't his strength. What could go wrong?
Well, and it'll be interesting too, like with his skill set, and you're 100% right, Dave. Like this offense is supposed to be built for him. We know that, and you're supposed to be maximizing his skill set, which is what the Browns should be doing. But it will be interesting to see, like, once Nick Chubb is back, what his role looks like, how much, if there is maybe an uptick from the early weeks of the season in running because you want to utilize him more. If they maybe start to use him in the passing game a little bit more and he catches some passes out of the slot or something like that. So yeah, the opportunities will be endless, but that dynamic between what the run game even looks like before Nick Chubb and then after Nick Chubb will be another interesting storyline once we get into the season, because I think he probably starts the season on the PUP list in some capacity or maybe isn't ready week one, and we probably don't see him until a few weeks into the season.
All right, so this is from Warren Sharp Football. Best winning percentage in non-division games since 2020, and this just kind of solidifies how much better than the rest of the NFL is the AFC North. Almost 63% winning percentage out of division. Next closest NFC West at 54.7. So when we kind of nitpick and look at, well, this, and this with the Browns, it's because they have to be really good because of the division they play in.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a testament to just how strong that AFC North is. We know that from following this division the last several years since the Browns really got better and since the Bengals drafted Joe Burrow, obviously, and I think that's going to be the case again this year, which is why like the schedule that the Browns have is going to be a gauntlet, because you got these great quarterbacks on there from other teams, you got the quarterbacks within the division, and you just have a tough division in general. 3 teams from this division made the playoffs last year. And there was the opportunity for the Bengals to even potentially slip in had they maybe had Joe Burrow a little bit longer or whatever, because they even finished above 500. So, yeah, I will say this. We talk a lot about the schedule and the quarterbacks that the Browns play this year. The one sort of that's problematic in a lot of ways, right? Because we feel that's going to be a reason why they maybe take a step back. But I also think like playing in this division prepares you for those matchups. Like you're more battle tested. And I talked to Juan Thornhill about that the other day on Afternoon Drive when I was filling in on 92 to the Fan. He kind of said, like, would you rather go into the playoffs having played like a bunch of, he didn't say scrubs, but a bunch of like not as good players and quarterbacks, or would you rather know like we saw the best of the best and we still made it here and now we're more scarred and ready for it? And obviously, I think the latter scenario is better for you. So I think the same thing kind of applies here for playing in this AFC North. It's a tough, rugged division, and I think it prepares you for that road ahead when you get to December and January.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Browns on SI and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about the stadium and more about the joint practices. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Browns on SI. Earlier this week, Cuyahoga County executives came out and said they don't have the money to fund the reported $2.4 billion domed stadium proposal in Brook Park, and that they are supporting the renovation project of the current stadium, which has a price tag of about $1 billion. Spencer, if they would have just said we don't have the money, I'd have been fine. Pouring $1 billion into the facility that's down there is ridiculous. The foundation of that building was built in 1931. They were trying to attract the 1932 Olympics. The sewage system hasn't been upgraded. That's probably why you're spending $1 billion. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, and it's funny. We had Cuyahoga County Executive Chris Ronian, Ronian, excuse me, on Afternoon Drive on Monday, and he, I asked him sort of point blank, because in their statement and all that, they emphasized how it's fiscally irresponsible, I think is the wording they used, to pump money into this Brook Park project. But my big question is, like, how is that more fiscally irresponsible when you're creating this new potential, revenue source in terms of taxes and jobs and events coming into town that also generate, tourism and revenue for the area, but putting, lipstick on a pig in the form of $1 billion renovation on the stadium on the lakefront that can only do so much. And then, in 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about renovating it yet again, and there's still problems up on the lakefront. And if you don't develop the lakefront, like, I just don't understand how this is the path that our representatives feel is best for the taxpayer. I shouldn't say that, because I get from a standpoint of, like, what are we really spending our money on? And to clarify too, like, it's not that money is coming out of anything right now to help fund the new stadium project, but they have to have right, taxpayers' money to back the bonds that would help pay for the other half that the Haslam's aren't paying. And so they're not willing to commit that right now. I just think, and listen, I understand, like, there's risk with any of this type of stuff. Maybe the Haslams ran the numbers and they're coming in higher than what the county thinks they're going to get from the, surrounding mixed development space, the restaurants, the bars, all that, in terms of revenue that they can use to repay the bonds. But I just can't fathom how a project like that is not beneficial to this area enough for even the county to back it, when obviously the stadium would still be in Cuyahoga County. I think a lot of this too, Dave, I don't mean to be long-winded here, but I think a lot of it is like, it's become this war of words. And I think there's like a lot of legacy play here, where I don't think the city wants to be known for losing the Browns again. And the Haslams are kind of like beating around the bush with, like, what they're doing. They still haven't really said they're committing to it. They're just, they put out all these renderings. They spent all this money on this stuff. But hey, we still haven't made a final decision. I think it's pretty clear where you're leaning. And it's like, nobody has to be the bad guy here. The city doesn't have to be accused of losing the Browns. They're 15 minutes down the road. They're not leaving Northeast Ohio. And the Haslams don't have to be the next owners that took the team from Cleveland, because they're staying in the area. I just wish, like, I hope cooler heads can prevail, and that hopefully the city sees it as an opportunity, like, we can finally develop the lakefront with what we want. And that's the thing, like, we've been hearing for years about them trying to develop that lakefront with the stadium there, and it just hasn't happened. So I have no faith that if they renovate the stadium, they'll finally commit to that and make it a place that makes sense for an NFL stadium to be. And until we get that, I think the Brook Park project makes a boatload more sense for this area, for the Browns, for everybody. And it's what you make it, right? Like, I know some Browns fans are committed to, like, the whole tradition thing and playing outdoors and all this, but I think that space in Brook Park could become a really cool game day experience for people, and it would become the hub for Browns fans. And I also think it's just kind of wrong to tout, like, if your only reason is like, well, tradition, it's always been this way. I just can't buy into that when I see a project that feels like it's beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, one of the definitions of insanity is if you always do what you did before and you expect something different. Here's the thing. The Browns shortchanged the building of the stadium because they were all excited that we kept our team name and our team colors, which is great.
Yeah.
That's fine. I get that. But you shortchanged the facility because you ramped it up too quick. You shortchanged the roster. Most expansion rosters had 2 years. This one had 1 because you were concerned about take the time, get a development that makes sense, that will last, and stop shortchanging and chasing things. Nobody's had an idea of how to develop down on the lakefront. It's been I've lived in this town for over 50 years, and nobody's had an idea. And I'm not blaming Chris Ronayne. Chris Ronayne is a really bright young guy that you know, he was with the University Circle and did a lot of good things down there.
Yeah.
I know Chris. I know his history. I just disagree. I don't think there's any way that it makes any sense to put $1 billion into that facility.
And again, you talk about fiscal responsibility. Yeah, like, and you talk about being fiscally responsible. Like, I just feel like to put taxpayer money back into something that in 10 years, again, you're going to have to put more taxpayer money into because that stadium ages so fast on the lakefront. There's already problems with it, and this isn't going to fix everything. You can't put a dome over it because the FAA restrictions with Burke Airport there, and I know they've talked about decommissioning that, but from what I understand, decommissioning that airport is going to take a long time. There's just too many logistical hurdles right now, and it'd be better to help fund a project that is innovative and, you know, forward thinking. And I again, all due respect to Chris Ronayne and the other representatives from the city, I just think like this is spinning your tires when you could use the taxpayers' money in a better way with the Brook Park project.
Here's the question that I would have: who wants to put $1 billion into developing something in Northeast Ohio? The only person I know is Jimmy Haslam, who's putting $1 billion to develop the other thing. So I say you get behind that and see what his vision is for it. Spencer, as always, great stuff. We're out of time. You know, the stadium thing it's going to be here for a little bit, I think.
It's definitely ongoing. We don't have the final chapters yet. We'll see what the next phase of this war on words is, and I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about. So, but as always, Dave, you know I appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much.
All right, Spencer German, make sure you check him out. 92.3 The Fan. He is also a writer for the Cleveland Browns on SI. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.